Catman has seen a lot of movies. He knows all of the Kino masterpieces. Top Gun, Face Off, Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking your juice in the hood. One of the best of them all would probably have to be The Fly, a movie in which Jeff Goldblum transforms himself into Brundlefly in a mad experiment gone horrifically wrong. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. This is just a lead up. Today I'm going to tell you about the real greatest movie of all time. You see, the way The Fly ends is as if it's setting up for a sequel. How could this be, you ask? Because at the end of The Fly, Brundlefly is dead. How can there be a sequel? Well, there actually already is a sequel, but it is not David Cronenberg, so who the fuck cares? My idea for the sequel to The Fly was created without the knowledge of this movie's existence. And for my version, we will actually get David Cronenberg to direct it. Since this sham sequel has already taken the name The Fly 2, we unfortunately will have to call the movie Brundlefly 2. Anyway, how does the sequel work? Well, if you remember, at the end of The Fly, Veronica is pregnant with Brundlefly's baby. So this means we could have a sequel where she gives birth to Brundlefly's son. She decides not to abort the baby because when they had sex, it wasn't that far gone. But really it's like she's tricking herself. She's just holding out with that hope that a piece of him may survive and can be restored. This leads to the birth of Brundlefly 2, an absolutely twisted and horrific creature. His birthing is painful and it's a very morbid scene to behold. Mortified as all of the doctors are, they undergo the standard procedure and Brundlefly 2 turns out to be actually healthy. Despite being such a profane abomination, Veronica raises the child as she would a human child and becomes a girl boss mother, defending her child against the glares and scowls and comments of other mothers. Through this instinctive motherly defense, she begins to become much more attached to her child and no longer sees it as just her responsibility or burden. There will be scenes where she realizes just how much she loves her child after berating mean, stuck-up women, where we see Brundlefly 2 grow up, raised strong on the love of his mother and her advice. She is kinda like Sarah Connor in Terminator 2 without the sense of urgency, just that badass, you know, giving him all the life advice and shit that he needs. At school, Brundlefly has the shit kicked out of him constantly by bullies for being the freak that he is. Despite the advice that he has been equipped with by his mother, he is too weak due to how disfigured he is to fight back against the bullies. Though he always tries to resolve the problem with his words and is far from a coward, he stands strong against the bullies and tries to talk sense into them. But alas, they kick the shit out of him. Since just about everyone in the school is disgusted by him, he is resigned to hang out only with the dregs of social status. One being his friend Wallace, who is severely Aspergic, and a girl with Down syndrome called Susie. He essentially plays a role as the leader of this group and uplifts the others and makes them feel better about themselves. There's a real camaraderie between the three, and it's like it's them against the world, and they have meaningful experiences together. We see this as they grow up until their final year of school. They're all 18 now, and just weeks before prom, Wallace gets hit by a car and brutally dies while fighting a bunch of jocks. This puts a lot of emotion in the air, and Brundlefly 2 acts as a massive support to Susie during this trying time. This leads to Susie catching feelings for Brundlefly 2, and on prom night at an after party, she leads him off upstairs to a bedroom where they do things too graphic to describe on YouTube. But Susie ends up pregnant and ends up giving birth just 1 hour after conception. She swells up and swells up until she explodes, and then a million tiny Brundleflies start flying about everywhere. There is then a shot where the camera spins around Brundlefly looking up to the sky shouting, "No!" The shot swirls into his face and then we cut to black and silence. When we cut back in, it's 30 years later. A rocket is being launched into space. It's kept a mystery who is on board the rocket, but we come to find out that the rocket is going to the sun, based on research that suggests part of the sun can actually be landed on. Someone questions the absurdity of this, like, no human could possibly withstand that heat, and the head of the operation is like, we're not sending a human. And then it cuts to inside the rocket, and there's a Brundlefly on board, checking all of the settings and preparing for liftoff. He gets blasted into into space, and then we cut to a plane where a businessman Brundlefly in a suit is reading a newspaper peacefully when the plane is attacked by a swarm of evil Brundleflies who puke all over the plane and melt it, bringing it down. The businessman Brundlefly shouts as the plane is heading down, "Curse you, Brundleflies!" We come to understand that out of all of those tiny Brundleflies that exploded out of Susie, many are evil beings who are driven by spite to take down humanity because of how their father was treated, and they have worked out that they can achieve this and overcome their individual weakness with their vast numbers. On the other hand, there are many Brundleflies that are just trying to fit into society and have normal lives. This is where we can introduce some of the characters we will be following. First of all, there is a postman Brundlefly who wants to ignore the conflict and just get on with his daily postman routes and just do his bit for society and live a normal life. Then there's all the hood Brundleflies. As you can imagine, Brundleflies are disadvantaged in society, so low-income areas end up full of them. A big part of the plot of this film is focused on the conflicts between the hood Brundleflies and the police force, and there just so happens to be a Brundlefly cop as well, which provides adequate introspection on the situation throughout the movie. Just to clarify, the hood Brundleflies aren't evil Brundleflies. They're neutral, they're morally damaged and jaded, but they're just trying to get by. Meanwhile, evil Brundleflies, they're basically like terrorists, just fucking everything up out of pure spite. There are Brundleflies that are acting as Brundlefly rights activists to make things better for the Brundlefly race, and they deeply disavow the evil Brundleflies who aren't doing what they do out of a desire for better quality of life for Brundleflies, but just out of pure spite. Brundlefly 2 himself is one of those rights activists, which is quite fitting given the previous role uplifting his comrades who are now gone, and his attachment to both Brundleflies and humans, having been raised by a good mother and having good human friends, and also literally every Brundlefly being a child of his. Our good characters are caught in many skirmishes with evil Brundleflies who view them as traitors for siding with humans. Brundlefly 2 remarks upon the fact that they all came from a human and so should love their origin, but it falls on deaf ears. These skirmishes intensify to the point where a bunch of Brundleflies hijack a plane and fly it into the Empire State Building. This causes mankind to declare a war against the evil Brundleflies, with the good Brundleflies helping them out, but being mistreated by humans now that tensions have raised more. We mostly throughout this follow the Brundleflies we've grown to know and love. The cop Brundlefly goes to the hood and calls out to them through a megaphone like, "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I need your help." It cuts away before we know if he managed to convince them, but then later the hood Brundleflies show up and start shooting evil Brundleflies out of the sky and shit. Postman Brundlefly is still stubborn and is just trying to follow his route, but shit is getting crazier and crazier and his life gets put at risk multiple times a day. All of the Brundleflies get into this huge epic battle that lasts multiple hours. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this film is 8.5 hours long. The first part of the film following Veronica and Brundlefly 2 is 2 hours long. The next part, another 2 hours, and then the battle is 3 hours long. And there's still more to come later. Around the time that the fight begins, we are introduced to Commander Brundlefly, who is overseeing operations in the military. Being a Brundlefly himself, he is able to understand the mind of the enemy. The battle goes crazy, just carnage, and they end up in the desert after a while of fighting. The OG Brundlefly 2 walks out into the desert like, "Stop my sons, stop all this madness. This is wrong," trying to put an end to this battle, but nobody hears him among all of the pandemonium. At this point, we cut to Postman Brundlefly, whose stubbornness has ended. He storms into his boss's office to declare that he quits, but in his boss's office, there are military men, and Commander Brundlefly himself is there. Commander Brundlefly says to Postman Brundlefly, "We need you to deliver just one last package." And Postman Brundlefly is like, "Just one more package, and then we're done." Some dramatic music starts and we switch back and forth between multiple Brundleflies in a montage. The Brundlefly in the rocket now finally reaching the sun and communicating this back to base. The cop Brundlefly fighting like hell within the madness with all of the hood Brundleflies and all of the evil Brundleflies attacking back. Brundlefly too walking around distraught, seeing all of his sons kill each other, trying to stop it all. Commander Brundlefly overseeing all of this, and finally, we see Postman Brundlefly in a plane. He puts the plane on autopilot and pushes a huge brown package out of the plane. When he gets back to piloting, he communicates to Commander Brundlefly that the package has been delivered. We cut between everyone once more and the package falling down. But as it soars through the wind, the cardboard flies off and it turns out to be a nuke. The nuke hits the ground and explodes, killing all of the Brundleflies in the desert. The blast reaches Postman Brundlefly too, as he realizes what he's just done. The Brundlefly in the rocket communicates that he is now making contact with the sun, and then the rocket just explodes and we see his face melt. And then the dramatic music ends and we see the silence on the decimated battlefield. We then cut to the military headquarters, where someone congratulates Commander Brundlefly, like, "Well done, sir. You eliminated all of the Brundleflies." But then Commander Brundlefly is like, "No, there's still one left." And then he points a gun up below his chin and shoots, killing himself and wiping out the Brundlefly race for good. The movie ends with Veronica standing trial for causing all of this. Humanity is shaken up by the devastation, and we're led to believe she will be sentenced to death for what she has caused. But human decency prevails, and her care and love is recognized, and she is set free from all of the charges. Credits roll as the song "Eye of the Brundlefly" plays on loop the whole time. You think the movie is over when suddenly, a post-credit scene, peace has been restored to the earth, the cities have been rebuilt, society has healed. We see a woman in a sperm bank going through the whole process, from walking in to when she leaves. But after she leaves, the camera slowly moves to where the sperm she was given was taken from. And we see leagues and leagues of sperm samples. Zooming in, we see the name on the label, Commander Brundlefly. Even his face is on the label. They're all labelled Commander Brundlefly. It then cuts to many women giving birth in hospital. The doctors are perplexed by the amount of cases. They're genuinely troubled. Eventually, all of these women explode, and millions of tiny Brundleflies start flying through the air, consuming everything in sight, including Veronica's eyes, who was out doing some grocery shopping. We then cut to the sun, and billions of Brundleflies are coming out of the sun. We slowly zoom out and see that Brundleflies are consuming planets. The orbit of the universe is destroyed, and everything spins off axis. The Earth crashes into the sun, and the galaxy is destroyed. But Brundleflies escape through wormholes and start eating other galaxies, rendering all existence to the same fate until nothing is left. Then on the screen appears the word Finn. But yeah, that's about the size of it. Subscribe to the Catman Show, leave a like, leave a comment. Goodbye.